Business leader and longtime television executive Joe Ahern talks about business, television, and what aspect of corporate life drove him to his knees. Next on Significant Insights. Hello, glad you could join me. Always a pleasure to have you with me. Chicagoans and San Franciscans are probably familiar with the name Joe Ahern. For nearly 40 years, he ran network television in both cities. In the 80s and 90s, he was the president and general manager of ABC Chicago. And it was during that time that Oprah came to ABC as the host of AM Chicago, and that was before she launched her nationally syndicated Oprah Winfrey Show. In the late 1990s, Joe moved to San Francisco to become president and general manager of KGO before coming back to Chicago in the same role for CBS. These days, Joe is the CEO of the 100 Club of Chicago, which provides for the families of first responders who have lost their lives in the line of duty. Recently, Joe and I had the opportunity to sit down for a candid discussion about business and faith. Joe, this is really a privilege. I've really been excited about this opportunity. You and I have known each other for years, being colleagues in Chicago television and so forth, but we never really had the opportunity just to sit down on camera and talk and for our people to find out who you are. You've had quite a journey, a very interesting journey that I think can be a blessing to a lot of people who are watching, especially guys who have been pretty successful, high-powered kind of personalities who struggle with some areas of their life and that, because I was in commercial television for 11 years, and part of that I was the operations programming manager of a CBS affiliate. And I know the kind of people who ran those places. Very high-powered personalities, very assertive, aggressive kinds of personalities, or they wouldn't have been there. From what I know of you, you're one of those personalities.
It's a tough business. It's very fast. I started out in Philadelphia in newspaper, radio, and then television. And I was at ABC and then went to Channel 7 in Chicago at WLS, and then ultimately became president and general manager. And when Cap Cities bought ABC, Warren Buffett was the principal stockholder. He was the 800-pound gorilla, as Tom Murphy, who was chairman of Cap Cities, described him. And I remember he would come in at least once a year, and we would have a big meeting, presidents of all the divisions. And he said he looked for three things in people. He said when he was hiring people, he said he looks for brains, he looks for passion, and he looks for honesty, integrity. Honesty, integrity. And he said the most important of the three, he says, is the honesty and integrity. He said because in any business, in any family, he says there are people that are passionate and very smart and driven, but they're not good people. And he said, get them out of your life, get them out of your business, and get them out of your life, because it's the worst thing that you can be associated with. And so I think I was really struck by that, and still am, that I look for the people around me, certainly that I work with, that are really have a natural intelligence, but are really passionate about what they're doing, but they're good people.
Well, what were the gifts and talents that you had? That you said you grew up in a family, a patriotic family, a pretty stable family. They went to work every day. They did their jobs. But what you ended up going into was a whole different kind of lifestyle than what your parents were involved in.
My mother was an Italian Southern Baptist. My dad was
an Italian Southern Baptist.
An Italian Southern Baptist. My dad was an Irish Catholic and grew up in Philly. I was an only child, and crazy. Here I am, but with a mom and a dad who absolutely loved one another, and adored their son. And we were poor. My dad was a milkman. This is when milkmen had a horse-drawn, in the 40s and 50s. And so, but the most important thing is having that stable family and a dad and a mom in the home, and especially a dad that was there.
And there was also
loved
then
you.
a spiritual foundation.
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, it was my Aunt Alice, my mom's sister, whose son died right after I was born, and she really saw me, I think, as her son Jimmy, and she was deeply religious, and she would minister to me all the time.
Wow.
And so it really affected me. My dad had this incredible, great connection with Christ. He loved Christ, and he was tough. When he was delivering milk, he would stop at all the churches, whether they were Catholic or Protestant, and that's the way I grew up. I mean, with this, I think, personal faith in Christ.
Did you, when you left home and you started in television, which is not the most conducive Christian environment in the world, how did you?
That's the understatement. Yes.
I also used to travel with ABC Wide World of Sports in some of my early jobs, and that was a whole experience in itself.
Yeah.
But how did this play out when you went into television? And I assume you went into sales, because that's where management in commercial television generally comes from.
Well, I think as a young man, I drifted away. I always had this deep faith in Christ, but I also drifted away as a young man. It wasn't until later on that I really began to reconnect with my faith. My wife, I was divorced and remarried, and a gal that had a wonderful connection in her faith with God. And so that changed a lot for me. And
at what point in your career did that happen?
Well, we're coming up on 21 years married, and so I always had this battle inside of me, and I think that I think we all do, Jerry. That right and wrong, are you cutting the edges off? Are you really doing the right thing? And it's that conversation you have.
Well, obviously you had that battle because you had such a strong foundation in biblical training and what it meant to be a Christian. And so you had boundaries.
Yeah.
That you had to make a choice and work through some guilt issues to get past those boundaries.
Very much so. And television is a business that it pays well. You're driven. It's exciting, and so that fills in all these gaps. And so you're constantly driven by the next deal and the next event and all those things. But after a lot of years, it's not as satisfying as having this true faith, true north with your faith in Christ.
After the break, Joe talks about some of his principles for success and about bringing Oprah Winfrey to Chicago. We'll be right back.
I had looked at about 100 different tapes of different talent, and the gal that worked on the AM Chicago show had worked in Baltimore at the People Are Talking, and Oprah was the co-host. And she brought me the tape, and I looked at it and I thought, wow.
Welcome back. Today, business executive Joe Ahern is talking about his long career in television and about life beyond the small screen. We begin part two with his beginnings and some of the reasons for his success. What would you say are the gifts and talents that allowed you to have the kind of success in commercial television that you had?
It's hard to describe. I think, I really think having a mom and dad that believed in me, that loved me, that felt that I could be anything that I wanted to, yet we lived in a $42 a month apartment in Philadelphia, and but having that strong faith foundation and a family that loved you was tremendous. My dad was a hard worker. He worked 3 jobs, and he died. He was 50 years of age, and he had cancer, and it affected me profoundly. But I always worked hard. So I would be the first guy in and the last guy to leave, but I always, I love to have fun. I always had fun in whatever I was doing. And so, but I was driven to succeed. I started modeling when I was in Philadelphia. I guess I was about 20 years of age, and working as a professional model and then selling newspaper ad space. And that was exciting. But one thing led to getting into the radio business, and selling. And I had a really just this appetite to be the best sales guy. I wanted to be a student of what goes on between 2 people when one's selling, the other one's buying. What are the dynamics that take place, and why are some salespeople more successful than others? It's not because they overtalk the person. It's not because they know all the products and the benefits, but what goes on between 2 people. And so I became a student of that, and I wanted to learn. And I tried to reach out to the people that, the mentors that I thought were influential, the guys that became truly, successful. Yeah. And I would ask them, hey, I'd love to sit down with you. I think it's that natural drive to succeed, and I think coming from a really poor, circumstance helps.
Where was it in your career when your faith really became a serious issue? Was it over a period of time that you came to that conclusion, or was there a point where an epiphany, something that happened, an event that you realized that I have to live out my faith? I mean, I really have to live out my faith. I have to get serious about it.
Boy, you're a good interviewer. I spent almost 30 years at ABC. I went to CBS, and then CBS fired me because they said that the ratings weren't going up fast enough. And I had hired Oprah, and it ran Channel 7, was the #1 station in the country. We were beating our nearest competitor by almost 50%.
Well, you actually brought Oprah to Chicago, didn't you?
I was the station manager under the president and general manager at the time. And we had the host of AM Chicago. We were getting beat by Phil Donahue, and he left, our host of AM Chicago, and we were looking for someone new.
I remember when she came to town.
Yeah, I had looked at about 100 different tapes of different talent, and the gal that worked on the AM Chicago show had worked in Baltimore at the People Are Talking, and Oprah was the co-host. And she brought me the tape, and I looked at it, and I thought, wow. And Baltimore was very much like Chicago, about 40% African American in the city, and they were, Oprah and People Are Talking were beating Donahue at the time. This is in the early '80s, '83, I think. They were beating Donahue by a big margin. And so we brought Oprah in,
and the rest is history.
And the rest is history.
Yeah,
whatever happened to her.
Absolutely.
And I'm thinking, gee, I've had a wonderful career. We've been very successful, and now all of a sudden they're telling me that, I'm fired, and 65 years of age. Puts you on your knees.
Was that somewhat
Defining
of a turning
moment.
point? Because I knew before that you and your wife were at Willow Creek Church. Before that.
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden, that had to be an ego buster.
I was, I think, very much connected to God then, and my wife too. Susan was really just a tremendous influence in me, and so it put me on my knees. at 65 years of age. And I remember praying, and I said, God, you know, I grew up on 61st Street in Philadelphia by a trolley barn, and now I'm living in a beautiful home, and I've had a wonderful, wonderful life.
Well, could I also mention your sport?
And polo, and I was playing polo.
You were
not a lot of guys that came out of West Philly were playing polo.
Yeah, you were a known entity. In fact, I came out, I think it was at the Yackley Barn out in
Yes.
in the Naperville area, and because I'm a horseman, and I did cowboy mounted shooting with one horse, and you had about 8 horses doing polo,
Yeah.
and just spent some time with you guys, and I recall having conversations about that. So you'd come a long way from those days in the $42 a month apartment.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden, you, part of the religious expression, you were excommunicated.
I was excommunicated. Yeah, yeah. I never thought of it quite like that. But I remember I got on my knees and I asked God. I said, you know, God, you've been so good to me and to my family. I have 3 daughters, and they're all healthy, and I have a woman in my life, my wife that I love. I've been blessed, and I said I'm praying for 3 things right now, because I always say ask God for, you know, the tough stuff, because He can handle it.
Yeah.
And I said I got to provide for my family, because my girls, I have still young daughters. And I want to get up every day and be passionate about what I'm doing, and I want to make a difference.
After the break, Joe will talk about how God answered his prayer in a way that has given him everything he asked for and more. We'll be right back.
You show up at a house where the dad has been murdered, and you bring them a check, and you tell them you're going to send the kids to college, and the whole neighborhood pours out. And they're thanking you and kissing you.
Today, Joe Ahern talked about his career as a television executive and some of the principles for success that, well, he learned along the way. Work harder than anyone else, find a good mentor, be a person of integrity, and as he found out in midlife, connect with God in an intimate and real way. When his last tenure in television ended, he asked God to help him find a position that he would be passionate about and where he could make a real difference. Well, God answered the prayer by sending him to the 100 Club of Chicago, which financially provides for the families of first responders killed in the line of duty. We talk more about that in today's Final Thoughts.
When I asked God for what do I do now, and he introduced me to the 100 Club, and I was there 3 weeks, and a police officer was murdered, Mike Flisk. He had 3 sons and a daughter, Peg, and his wife Nora, and he was tragically murdered the day after Thanksgiving, and I had to go deliver that check. And it was, I had the greatest anxiety I've ever had, literally shaking.
Wow.
And I went to the home. I was sitting with the president of our board, sitting in the car. I said to him, I don't want to weird you out. I said, but I can't do this by myself. I said, I just want to say a prayer here because I need help from the guy upstairs. And I said, God, I need your help. I'm scared. I'm walking in. This family just went through the worst tragedy that anyone could possibly imagine. And I walked in, there were 3 sons, Michael, John, Tim, and Brian. They had police baseball caps on, and daughter Peg, and wife Nora, and a dog Maggie, and a small home. And I said, I'm here to help you from the 100 Club family, and you're part of our family, and we'll be with you forever. I walked out of there, I stood in the middle of the block, and I called my wife, and I just broke down crying. And she said, are you going to be able to do this job? This is 3 weeks after this is a big difference from running a television station. And I'm standing in the middle of the block, sobbing like a little boy. And I said to her, it's not a job. This is a passion, this is a calling, and this is what God gave me.
So now explain what this 100 Club is and what it's about.
When a police officer or a firefighter is killed in the line of duty, now in Cook or Lake County, and there's about 45,000 law enforcement and firefighters. And so if they die in the line of duty, I show up within the first 24 hours, usually within the first 12 hours, and provide financial assistance. We give the widow $50,000.
Wow.
And there's no forms to fill out. There's no waiting. We're there to help the family. That's the way it should be.
Now, where does this money come from?
This is my new CEO handshake. I walk around like this. Hi, Joe Ahern from the 100 Club. Because I raise money from people that have a heart for our police officers and our firefighters, wealthy donors, foundations, corporations.
What was the response, Joe, of his wife when you walked in and sat down with her?
The level of gratefulness I've never seen like anything in anything I've ever experienced. You show up at a house where the dad has been murdered, and you bring them a check and you tell them you're going to send the kids to college, and the whole neighborhood pours out, and they're thanking you and kissing you. When the daughter of Mike Fliss graduated from college, I was invited to the graduation, and Mom, Nora, came over to me and said, you know, we couldn't have done this without you, because we got her a full ride.
Yeah.
And wow. That's a kind of level of gratification, satisfaction that you'll never get in broadcast. And it goes beyond the money and the fact that you're providing college education. It's the family knowing that people care about them,
yeah.
that they were important. And boy, that's just irreplaceable. I mean, I am so grateful for what I'm doing today. As I said, my prayers are prayers of gratefulness every single day that I get a chance to do what I'm doing.
I asked you what your gifts and talents were that allowed you to be successful in commercial television. And now, do you feel you're reapplying those same gifts and talents?
Well, my wife says that I can't hammer a nail in the wall. She says, but I could talk one into the wall. And so, so she says, so go out and talk.
I like
and that's
that.
what I'm doing. But now I'm doing it for police officers and firefighters and guys and women that are putting their life on the line every single day.
Hey, Joe, to a large degree, it's still a sales job.
It is.
It's still a sales job.
Yeah.
You know, you're just selling a different product to different people for a different purpose.
But I have a wonderful product, and I said, I just need to get up to bat, because when you tell people about what this organization does and how you're able to change lives, it's hard for people to say no. They want to help. Well, I really enjoyed that interview today with Joe. And you know, one of the things I really appreciate about Joe Ahern is his enthusiasm. He's a passionate guy. He's enthusiastic about, he was enthusiastic about his career in television, and he was very successful at it. But the same gifts and talents that made him successful in broadcasting, he had brought with him now to the 100 Club of Chicago. And as I talked to Joe, in fact, I talked to him the other day on the telephone, it's obvious that he is just as passionate, maybe even more passionate, about the 100 Club than even he was about his television career, and he did a wonderful job in television. But one of the things he says is, I'm a lifelong learner. I appreciated that very much. And by the way, if you would like to find out more about the 100 Club of Chicago, they do an incredible job. And Joe is doing an incredible job of leading that organization. If you'd like to find out more about it, you can go to 100clubchicago.org. That's 100clubchicago.org, and they have all kinds of information about it. And if you'd like to donate to it, you can also do that there. Thanks for joining me. God bless you. See you next time.